Hi, this is Greg Hendricks, and in this video I'm going to show you a couple of things you can do with the single switch utility node within Maya. The first thing I'm going to show is how to use only one material and have many different textures randomly applied to all the objects the material is assigned to, and how you can use a ramp to control how many of the objects have a certain texture. So let's say I want more of the rocks to have this texture. So I can just update the ramp here and have more of the rocks randomly have that texture. And let's say I want more of them to have this darker gray texture. So I can just update this ramp here and the rocks will update accordingly. And unfortunately, when you apply texture to these ramp color entries, it turns the ramp black. So you just kind of have to wiggle these things around and figure out which texture is applied to which one if you forgot. Alright, so let's close this down and create a new scene, and I'll show you how to set that up. So for the example, I'll create 16 spheres. So I'll create a sphere, hit Shift D to duplicate with transform, and keep doing that until I get 16 spheres here. And now I'm going to go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, and if your hypershade looks like this, just click this button here, and we're only going to be working in the work area. So let me drag in a Lambert here. You can use any material you like, but for this example I'll use a Lambert. Let me grab all these spheres and right click and hold and assign material to selection. And now we're going to need a ramp. So let me middle click drag a ramp into here. And we don't need this place 2D texture in our work area, so I'll select it, go to graph, remove selected from graph. And now I'll right click the output arrow and go to out color and left click and hold on the input arrow and connect that to the color. So now I have the out color of the ramp going to the color of the material. Now let's click on the utility section over here and scroll down until we see the single switch node, and I'll middle click drag that into the work area. Now I'll hold shift, middle click and drag onto the ramp, and that will bring up the connection editor, and I'll connect the output from the single switch node into the V-chord attribute onto the ramp. And now I'll double click the single switch node to bring up the attribute editor, and I'll click the add surfaces button. And what that will do is figure out what objects the material is assigned to and populate the end shapelets with those objects. So as you see here, I have P sphere 1 through P sphere 16. And now we're going to use a bit of mel to assign each of these an end single attribute. And what this attribute does is tell the single switch node where on the ramp to sample the color from. So let's open up the script editor, and the syntax to do this is the switch node name, and in this case it's called single shading switch 1 dot input element number dot end single, and this element number tells the switch node which value you want to map. So input 0 right now is P sphere 16, and this is input 1, input 2, input 3, etc. So this right here will tell the switch node I want the P sphere 16, that's at index 0, to sample at the position of 0.5 on the ramp. So let's run this and double click the ramp, and right here you see at position 0.5 is this green color. So let's do a render, and you see the 16th sphere is green now. So let's go over to this tab, and what we're going to do is do a for loop, and since we have 16 objects, we'll loop through 16 different times. Here we give the index number, so we're going through index through 0 to 15, and we're going to assign each object a random value from 0 to 1 to sample from on the ramp. So every object will have a random position on this ramp, and we'll sample a different color value from the different positions. So let's run this, and let me minimize these things, and let me hit the 6 key on the keyboard and go into texture mode in the viewport. And you see all the spheres are red, and this, when you use this technique, it doesn't update in the viewport, so you just got to do a render. So I'll do IPR render, and I'll select the ramp, and Let me change the interpolation to none, just so you can see this a little bit easier, what's going on. So the more blue I add to the ramp, the more blue spheres there are. The more green I add, the more green, etc. And all I did for the first example with the rocks is you just click this checker button for the color and apply a file node, and you can apply different textures to these color values. So for example, if I do that as a checkered and then give that more space on the ramp, you'll see it updates these spheres accordingly. So that's the first example. Let me load up the next scene. Now we're going to use the single switch node to control the glow intensity. So let me zoom in here and do an IPR render. So when I move this control here, the glow intensity will follow this control. And this isn't a glow effect parented to the control, but it's actually changing the glow intensity for each of these different objects. And it's just using one material. So let me reset that and close that and show you how to set this up. And for this example, we're going to be setting these objects up here. So let me go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And these objects have this material applied to them. So I'll just grab that material and map that into the work area. So let me just select objects with material just to show you. This material is applied to all these different objects. So now let's go to ramp, and I'll middle click drag ramp into here, and I'll right click and hold on the output and choose the out color R. So we'll only be using the red value from the ramp. Now let me left click and hold onto the input of the material and go to glow intensity. So now I have the red color from the ramp going into the glow intensity of the material. Now let's go to the utility section and drag in a single switch node and hold shift, middle click, drag onto the ramp, bring up that connection editor, and I'll connect the output into the V chord of the ramp. I'll double click the single shading switch and click add surfaces, and I'll populate the end shape list with all the different objects and material assigned to. Now I'll double click the ramp, and since we're just using the red value, I'll just switch these for now, and I'll change this to black, and I'll change this to black. So in this example, don't think of the ramp using the red color, but all we're doing is using the data from the value. So as far as the shading network is concerned, it doesn't care that it's red, it just cares about this red value, which is 1. So once we run the mel code to set it up, if I render it, the middle part of these objects is going to have the highest glow intensity. So let me open up the script editor, and we have 17 different objects. So I'll change this to loop 17 times, and instead of giving them random values on the ramp, I'll take the index and add 1 and divide that by the total number of objects. And make sure you add this 0.0, because that'll tell Maya we're using a floating point value, and if you just say 17, Maya will think you're dealing with an integer and round down to 0. So don't forget this 0.0 at the end, or it'll mess up. So what's going on here is we don't want to loop, because since arrays start at 0 base, it's going from 0 to 16, which is 0's right here, and the 16th index is all the way down here. So we want to do our math on value 1 to 17. So that's why I'm adding 1 more to the index here, because if we divide 17 by 17, that gives us 1. So let me select the ramp. So down here is 0 and up here is 1, and this will incrementally assign each object a different part of this ramp going up. So once we reach the last object will be sampling from this value up here, which is 1. So let me run this and close all this stuff and do an IPR render. As you see here, the middle part of these objects is has the highest glow intensity. And if we want the glow to be less intense, we'll just change this value here to be something lower, like 0.5, and that'll have direct control over the glow intensity. And I can move this around and have the glow intensity move depending on where the ramp is, where the red color on the ramp is. So you could do stuff like this, and you could even squeeze these black values in to have the glow more in a more tight area. Or you can even do stuff like this and have this part glow and it kind of fade out and come back. So you have all the power of a ramp, but we're controlling the glow intensity with it. And to have the control that I showed earlier, like I had this control controlling the ramp. So let me shut this down. So all I did was use the connection editor, and I connected translate Z of this control into the ramp's selected position for this red value. So when I move this, it doesn't update in attribute editor until I render, but you see it is controlling the selected position of this ramp. So all I did was, if you go to Window, General Editors, Connection Editor, I just connected the Translate Z into the ramp's selected position for that index. So you go to Color Entry List, and if you're not sure which one of these, so it has 3 entries because we have the black, red, and black. So you have 3 entries in there. If you're not sure which one is the red one, just open up the script editor and you want to move this entry around, and it will tell you which one it's working on. So I figured out it was the index 0 entry is the one with the red color by looking here. So then I just took the Translate Z and connected that into that color entry list positions, and that's how you control a position with a control. Alright, so those are 2 things you can do with the single shading switch utility node. Alright, so I hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.